Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Logical Reaction Guy. Today we're going to be reacting to a Vox video on the conversation regarding the ozone layer. I know there were products in air sprays like CFCs that were mainly contributing to the depletion of the ozone layer. So I guess we're going to hear more about that in this video. It's a short video, only 9 minutes. I thought we could just watch it, see what they're saying, and add some commentary. So just for background reference, I have a PhD in chemical engineering. I went to grad school on the East Coast. I now live on the West Coast. I'm originally from the Caribbean, so I think that I've always been really intrigued in the climate change discussion. I did my research broadly in the field of energy, trying to use alternative sources of energy in order to fuel the world's energy demands. So let's jump right into the video. We can add commentary as we go through. 1980. Just for reference, this is Vox's video. It's not mine. I don't necessarily care about making money from this video. It's just purely for educational purposes. So let's see what Vox has to say on this.
The 80s were all about big hair, neon, MTV, and then there was this.
Every October, a hole appears in the ozone layer over the South Pole. The hole in the ozone shield is the size of the continental United States.
So if you're not super aware on the issues regarding the ozone layer, the bases are that the ozone layer helps keep out a lot of the harmful sunlight, right, that can impact humans from things like skin cancer to increasing the global temperature. And so the goal was, if we can find ways to avoid damaging the ozone layer, then we can prevent, large-scale, environmental issues.
The protective ozone layer is being threatened as never before. We're all at risk.
Scientists warned that humanity was on track to completely destroy the ozone layer by 2050.
So not just issues with destroying, I just want to pause there, not just issues with destroying the ozone layer, but there's also issues with, when we're going to reach some critical point at which temperature change from when we started burning fossil fuels will then start to have large-scale impacts on our planet, right? So there's issues with destroying the ozone layer, there's issues with greenhouse gases increasing the annual earthly temperature, there's issues with obviously deforestation, with rising sea levels, things of the sort.
Without it, ecosystems would collapse, skin cancer rates would skyrocket, and life as we know it would cease to exist.
Again, these are all things that I just talked about at the beginning of the video. So it seems like they're bringing them up, so I seem to be on the right path there.
But today, the ozone layer is healing. In an unprecedented act, the world came together to prevent an environmental catastrophe. So, how did we do it? And what can we learn from it? The ozone layer is a sort of belt around the Earth made up of gaseous molecules. It protects every living thing by absorbing 2 types of ultraviolet radiation from the sun.
This is again what I mentioned, the fact that the ozone layer is meant to prevent harmful forms of electromagnetic radiation from penetrating the Earth's surface or penetrating the Earth's atmosphere.
It's a powerful shield, but it's also fragile. In 1985, scientists discovered a massive loss of ozone here, right over Antarctica. 40% of the layer had dissipated, creating a hole. Scientists realized the hole formed in the spring, and every year it got worse.
This was a wake-up call. It wasn't small and far in the future. It was now, and way bigger than anybody ever imagined, and no one...
That's Dr. Solomon, an atmospheric chemist. In 1986, she flew to Antarctica, along with other scientists, to investigate the cause of the ozone hole.
Leading the team is Susan Solomon, a young atmospheric chemist.
Wow, just super goated, going all the way to Antarctica. I don't know if I could ever do that. So I didn't do experimental research, nor was I doing field research. It was mainly computational work using high-performance computing in order to model catalyst. However, I'm not sure if I could ever do research to this level. So just for some background, I did field research as a as an undergrad student, but nothing to this level.
Missed from Boulder, Colorado.
Now, once you step off the plane in Antarctica, if you've never been there before, your main goal is to get out without getting frostbite. But really, our goal was to take measurements, not just of ozone, but also of different chemicals that would help to show why it was going away.
Some scientists released balloons into the sky to take ozone measurements, while others took measurements on the ground. And they all came to the same conclusion. The biggest problem was chlorine from a man.
I got it right. This is exactly what I was talking about, these CFCs. And they're man-made, and they came they were usually in air spray products. So let's watch on and see what else you got to say about it.
Chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs.
Yes, I got
On
that.
the ground, CFCs aren't harmful. But once they float up to the stratosphere, the sun breaks them down into chlorine. They bind with ozone to make oxygen and chlorine monoxide. Then the loose oxygen atoms bump the chlorine atom out, freeing it to destroy more ozone molecules. And that causes a chain reaction.
A long lifetime of the chlorofluorocarbons.
So if you don't know,
the problem,
if you don't know much about chain reactions, the way chain reactions work are you start with some initiation, right? And that can be something really small, but that's where you're depleting your reactant, and then the chain reaction is a series of elementary steps in which the intermediate steps of the reaction occur. So you have intermediate products that are being consumed, and they're being consumed so quickly you can not even measure that rate. Usually in science we can measure the depletion of the reactant or the formation of the product. Those intermediate steps are happening quite quickly. And so it's really hard to measure that. And so chain reactions as a result, occurred quickly and usually untraceably.
Live anywhere between 50 and 150 years in our atmosphere, so means that every year that you use, what you used the year before is almost entirely still there. So it just builds up and builds up exponentially.
And back then, we used a lot of CFCs.
Yeah, here
The
they are.
US had already moved away from CFCs in aerosol cans, but most of the world hadn't yet. And they were still in everything from refrigerators and air conditioners and styrofoam.
Yeah, I remember. So my dad's a mechanic of all sorts of things, including air conditioners and refrigerators, and he always used to talk about how you need a can of Freon, right? And Freon actually contains these CFC molecules as well. So I know that car companies in the future are going to be looking towards alternative sources of cooling, probably in the form of using what are those things called again? They're like heat fans. I think we should watch a video on those because they're like kind of like alternatives to using ACs.
The entire world needed to make a big change quickly, or we'd face
catastrophe, unmitigated catastrophe.
In 1987, ozone levels had dropped by 50%. This growing threat led to some of the fastest collective action on climate we've ever seen.
So I like to think of it as there's 3 P's.
Okay, here's the problem, right? I don't want this video to give the illusion that people are, that countries and organizations will work quickly on climate change. Unfortunately, the world's demand for energy, our usage of non-renewable fuels, far succeeds our ability to mitigate the issue. So I just want to point that out.
When they're met, we do very well at addressing environmental problems. So it was personal, it was perceptible, and the solutions were practical.
It's crazy. This sounds like what those consulting firms do when you're, like when you're working for them. Oh, why should we tackle this problem? What are the solutions we should look at? They should be personal, perceptible, and practical. This is just silly. Just using silly tag words and catchy phrases.
Everybody understands skin cancer. The personal nature of the threat is huge. And the perceptible was easy to do with satellite measurements.
I just really hate how people use these types of terms to, to justify solving a problem. It needs to be catchy. The solution needs to sound catchy. It needs to be some overlapping three-way Venn diagrams.
You can just watch it get completely destroyed and go to zero.
Bureaucratic
there should have been a lot of
silliness.
We have practical solutions. It was easy.
Speaking of which, we should react to a video on the opioid crisis and how McKinsey and Co. Had a role to play in that.
Find substitutes for chloroform spray-cans. That took, less than a year to do. It was a very straightforward switch. And I think the main unifying factor in all of that is the public.
Scientists like Dr. Solomon held press conferences to inform the public.
I think we will eventually see large-scale depletions of the ozone layer at other latitudes.
The ozone hole started showing up on TV shows and movies.
Those damn fluorocarbons have been kicking hell out of the ozone. Macaroni will burn off.
I like how a lot of the times it takes pop culture and media, right? Not necessarily news media, but media in the form of television and movies in order to make people more aware of these issues. I'm hoping that, through YouTube, I can somewhat help, right? I'm not the overall solution or messenger for this, but, it's all about translation, right? Scientists talk to scientists in our guarded language. I'd like to be scientists just talking to regular people.
Well, so will the ozone eventually.
And
LOL at Roseanne. Anyone here, used to just watch Nick at Night, 3, 4 in the morning, and then, Roseanne would come on? That'd be that used to be the greatest point of my life. And then, after that, George Lopez at Nick at Night. Anyone else relate to that?
all this public awareness put pressure on leaders around the world to act.
We are here today because we recognize that urgent action is necessary.
And the Montreal Protocol made it official. It recognized that worldwide emissions can significantly deplete the ozone layer and result in adverse effects on human health and the environment. It listed control measures to reduce ozone-depleting substances in a series of steps, including help for developing countries who need alternative technology and substituting products. Every single country eventually signed the protocol, making it the only universal treaty to ever.
This seems quite progressive, no? I'm surprised that, there was so much unity on ratifying this situation.
Will be ratified, and the most successful environmental agreement in human history. Soon after, the world's largest CFC producer began to think,
Oh, DuPont, oh, DuPont, oh, DuPont. Crazy enough, we should also watch a video on the future on, I think it was DuPont, that had something to do with the Teflon in water. These larger chemical companies they played a role in how the world has changed from a chemical standpoint, right? It would seem that in trying to solve one of the world's problems, we end up creating another, right, that ends up being much worse.
phase them out. Since the protocol went into effect on January 1st, 1989, the consumption of ozone-depleting substances, including CFCs, plummeted. Today, more than 30 years after the Montreal Protocol was signed, the ozone hole has stopped growing, and it's now shrinking. And by 2065, it is expected to have recovered completely. But there's more to be done. After the CFC ban, we began using hydrofluorocarbons, or HFC.
What is that? HFCs? Now, mind you, I'm not an atmospheric chemist, nor do I know much about what goes into, products, but products like hairsprays and things that use CFCs. But what the hell are HFCs? The hell?
HFCs don't deplete the ozone layer, but they are a potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate.
We have many greenhouse gases. I think methane is one that's troublesome, carbon dioxide, and now we have to deal with HFCs. So you can see how this is such a big issue, right? We have to find better ways to deal with the climate crisis.
And it's the fastest growing one. So in 2016, the Montreal Protocol was amended to include HFCs, and now they are being phased out too. But they are only one part of a larger issue.
Climate change is already happening right here, right now.
Experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe.
Honestly, so my advisor, she always used to share videos on how people, like models people would, compute and estimates on when we would reach like that critical tipping point. Some people say it's going to happen sometime in the 2020s. Some people say 2030. Some people say 2040s. Climate. I'm of the opinion that dealing with the climate crisis requires extreme action from global corporations as well as larger countries, right? Because as you can see, the U.S., which is kind of like more of a westernized country, has it's starting to make moves toward this. But then we have countries like India and China that they have a slightly different view on the matter, which is that they've just started to use greenhouse gases and they're starting to become more westernized. So they are the opinion that we already have infrastructure that establishes our ability to produce energy using greenhouse gases. Why do you want us, to follow along with, like in your footsteps? Because you've had the chance to burn all your fossil fuels. We want that opportunity as well. So you see, it's going to be an issue, right, from our two larger countries in the world, India and China, or rather most populous.
Entire ecosystems are collapsing.
Shout out to Greta.
Unprecedented and even irreversible changes are happening to
Greta
this
Thunberg,
planet.
she is amazing.
It's beyond any doubt that human activity is to blame.
Climate change, our most challenging environmental problem.
My whole problem is, how is the U.S. going to mitigate climate change when everyone wants a car? So I really think we should react on a public transit video in the future. I think I'll do City Beautiful next.
Is still in need of big solutions.
So I think people in most parts of the world now understand and are concerned about the personal impact. They found it to be perceptible. And we are finding practical solutions. It's not true that we can't do it anymore. We need to keep our eye on the ball on climate change, and if we do, we will get the environment that we demand.
What do you guys think about this? Which country do you think is going to lead the effort on climate change? I think there are some that are already doing quite a good job. Germany, the Netherlands. I don't know. What do you guys think? It's really interesting. It's eye-opening. So some of this stuff I didn't know, but it's a learning experience all the time. I was able to add some interesting commentary. Again, we dealt with one issue, but it still remains the issue of the fact that we're producing more greenhouse gases, right? Despite our ozone layer starting to reform. So we've dealt with one issue, but again, as I said, solving one problem creates another in this world. So let's try to do good. Let's try to be scientifically minded, and I hope I left you something to reflect on. So I'll leave you there, and let's chat again soon about something else.